future Dr. Kai, who is at the University of Virginia School of Medicine, where she's doing her research here. We have future Dr. Jackson at Oregon Health and Science University, future Dr. Price at Mass Eye and Ear, Dr. Reyes at Bascom Palmer Eye Institute, and future Dr. Bryant at Ohio State University.
Thank you. Before we get into research year questions, can each of you just tell us what your ophthalmology origin story is? Please tell us about your aha moment in medical school that led you to ophthalmology. And feel free to answer the questions in any order.
So I don't mind going first. Hi guys, my name is Alana Bryant, and I honestly didn't have a true aha moment in ophthalmology. I was dead set on being a gynecologist, and by the time I think it was December of my third year, I was like, yep, like definitely gonna apply OB, everything's gonna be fine. Obviously my home school doesn't have a home, well, I guess maybe you don't know that. Meharry doesn't have a home ophthalmology program. So they usually send us away to different sites because there's just not enough patient, I guess, turnover for us to get enough exposure. So they send us to Vanderbilt if we want to do an ophthalmology rotation. So I honestly got lucky. The lady said, hey, we've got a 2-week opening at Vanderbilt if you want to do a rotation, let me know. I ended up doing it, spent 2 weeks there, totally dropped gynecology and just really enjoyed it. All of the doctors seemed like they enjoyed their lives. I liked that you could see patients across all age ranges, all different types of ethnicities and backgrounds and culture. And it's just really special to connect with people. Also being able to kind of see like tangibly disease in the back of the eye or in the front of the eye was really special to me. But I can't say that I was like, oh my gosh, this is like my moment, this is it. I just really liked it and kind of made the transition.
I'll piggyback because I also didn't have like a super wow moment and I didn't want to be lame and go first. My name is Zara, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Okay, so mine's kind of similar. I wasn't dead set on another specialty per se, but like I kind of pieced it together based off like what am I looking for in a specialty, and that kind of happened throughout my third year rotations, which eventually kind of led to why I took a research year. It was definitely a late decision for me. So if for anyone just starting off this whole conversation, it's okay if you decided late, it's going to be okay. So pretty much what I did is like I was on my gen surge rotation first, and that really kind of enlightened me to I definitely want to operate. Like that eliminated a ton of specialties for me. I obviously had an idea I was interested in ophtho. I was lucky to have a lot of like close mentors nearby that like it's easy to shadow at UM, but without that home program, I think it would have been a tougher way for me to find the specialty for sure. And then it kind of was like, as I went through my rotations, I just narrowed down what I was looking for. And then eventually I was like, I don't think I find that same like happiness and passion alongside with like everything I'm looking for, like checking all the boxes in any other field. So I decided like mid third year. So that gives anyone any comfort. That's when I decided on ophtho.
I don't mind going next. Hey everyone, my name is Nico. First off, thanks. Hey Sarah. Thanks everyone. And especially sharing the scope for sharing the invite. But I kind of fall on the other side of the spectrum. I found out, or I was introduced to ophthalmology super young. I was in high school. Since elementary school though, I participated in like community health clinics. And then I got stationed at the Vision Screening Center in high school. So the ophthalmologist in my hometown saw that I had this keen interest. And then he was like, hey, you want to shadow me over the summer? Then that led to my first job as an ophthalmic tech in high school, and then pushed me to pursue medicine from there. But I also have a really big interest in global ophthalmology, and the same mentor planted a lot of seeds back then too. So he did a lot of international outreach and worked with programs abroad. And so that's why I pursued med school that shared my vision of learning medicine through a global lens. So I attended medical school in Australia for the first half, and then the second half in New Orleans, where I did all my clerkships. And then now I'm here at Bascom doing research. So.
Hey everyone. I guess my introduction to ophthalmology was early in medical school, but I didn't know much about ophthalmology in general when I first was introduced to it. So my first year of medical school, we kind of have these situations where we go and just see what it's like in private practice, et cetera. And so I was assigned to an ophthalmologist. And prior to medical school, I did a little bit of surgical technician things, and I was an MA. I did a lot of things before I came to medical school. So I kind of knew that I wanted to do something surgical. And during that interaction with the ophthalmologist, I thought it was really interesting. So I joined kind of our ophthalmology interest group at my school, because we also don't have a ophthalmology program. I go to Morehouse School of Medicine. And through that, I found the faculty advisor. I spoke with her, and then she kind of told me to speak with other people. So it was kind of like a snowball effect for me. And over the summer, I decided to do a summer program. And I learned a lot more about the specialty and was really captivated by it. It was something that I felt like just fit what I wanted to do. I like doing very small, intricate things. And I also like the OR, and also the pathologies that can manifest in the eye were really cool to me. And so through my summer program, I was more interested in it. And I also did a master's program before going to medical school. So after my second year, I kind of had an idea that I wanted to do some research. And so I applied for a grant and then ended up getting the grant. And so now I'm kind of leaning more towards ophthalmology. Of course, I'm still open to everything, but I'm kind of in the middle of my third year right now. So that's my path.
For me, it was similar to Zara, I think, where like I decided pretty late on. I actually, like, with only one rotation left in third year, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. So I actually have Gen Surg to thank too, but kind of for a different reason. I had a really tough time on Gen Surg, especially with the personalities, and then so I had ophthalmology as the subspecialty, specialty for surgery afterwards, and I just like. I think having the Gen Surg experience, no hate towards Gen Surg, but maybe I just had a personally tough time. But then going to ophtho and seeing how nice everyone was and how happy everyone was, and then just being able to actually talk to patients during clinic rather than just like the 4 a.m. like, are they breathing? Are they still alive? Did they fart? Like, the typical Gen Surg questions. I thought that was just such a breath of fresh air. But I did think about it a little bit more. And then ultimately, as I went through my third year and saw like, this one isn't as good as ophtho, this rotation's not as good as ophtho, that's when I decided kind of last minute that, okay, I think this is it for me.
Wait, show you same. It was really like, oh, I want to be a surgeon, but not this kind. Again, no offense, but it was very like, it really helped figure out what kind of surgeons.
John, would you like to share?
Of course, of course. So for me, I'm a like non-traditional student, so I studied a lot of things before I came to med school, one of which was film. So I had kind of vaguely considered ophthalmology, but it wasn't until my third year I did an elective rotation in ophthalmology. And I think it was the first time one of my attendings was, they don't get too many people who are actually interested in ophthalmology. It's mostly people just coming through that just want to like, I want to check it out before I graduate. But I told them I was interested. And so I was trying to learn all the different techniques, like learn how to use the indirect ophthalmoscope and start using the 90 diopter lens at the slit lamp. But really, it was the first time that I correctly, really solidly imaged the retina using the 90 diopter lens at the slit lamp. My attending had a patient, it was an older woman. She had some lesions in the back of her retina from toxoplasmosis. So I was able to find those and then kind of track the vessels back and see the optic nerve head. But when I was doing that, it just reminded me of, like filming or like shooting with a camera. It's like, framing the shot, trying to find the thing. And I just thought I could do this every single day. I could do lots of medicine. It would still be entertaining. And I would still, get a lot out of helping people. There's several other things I was interested in, kind of GI and some other things, but like doing that, working with my hand, working with lenses, I've in some way, shape, or form been studying vision in different ways like my entire life. And that just kind of moment distilled it for me. So then I was like, crap, I want to do ophthalmology. It's like third year in the middle of a pandemic. Um, how am I going to do this? And so it's been a lot of me trying to figure out how to make that a reality. And, hopefully I will. We'll see. But either way, it's been a fulfilling journey. When we talk about some of the other stuff, like the type of research I'm doing, I'll talk a little bit more about some of my varied background and how it's kind of come together. But I did have kind of an aha moment when I went from like, yeah, this sounds interesting to being like, oh no, this is the one. So that was mine.
Thank you for sharing that. It was beautiful. I hope you include some of that in your personal statement. Now we'll move on to the more research-centered questions. The first is, how do you know you need a research year? Zara kind of already spoke to this, but why and how did you take a research year?
I can start on that note. I guess the general question, like whenever anyone asks me if they should take one, I always say that like it just depends if you want to. Like I think you're always going to get differing advice from mentors, and there are obviously like circumstances in which you might get strong advice in one direction or the other, and I think we can all imagine those examples. But for the most part, like if someone's been gearing up towards opto and you're like on the fence, it really comes down to, in my opinion, like, do you want to? Because it's a lot of work, and I think that's something that like it's not, I think anyone on this panel could agree it's a lot of work, and it has to really come from like your self-drive and motivation. There's unfortunately sometimes a financial hit. Mine was unfunded. So not only am I like paying for an extra year without loans, but I'm losing out on a year of, resident income or potentially attending income one day. So it's like realistic things to think about. I'm personally not in a circumstance of like, I don't have any children or I'm not married, but that could be someone's life. These are all factors that are just as important as whatever your mentors are going to tell you. So I think for each person, it's like what feels right to you. And at the end of the day, do you want to? And now I'll answer, like for me personally, I was really opposed to a research year. Like I did not want to, even like, me with my strong head, I just decided opto and I was like, no, I don't want to do research here. And I actually wasn't intending to. So yes, I made the decision already late, but I didn't decide to take a research year until May of my third year, or even June maybe, because like I was going through my whole year and I was set to apply. And truthfully, the reason I took one, I guess I didn't allude to it properly. It was more so just because I was like, I never took a year off before and I was really burnt out. And I just felt that like there was more I could do to make myself stand out in the field. I felt like, I don't know. I felt like when I applied to med school, I felt really confident about my application. I felt like I had set myself apart and I just didn't feel like I had met my full potential. And then that's where I got the personal motivation. Before that, I was like, I don't want to do a year of research. So I didn't like have it in mind. Because I don't think it's as formulaic as that. There are people that take research years and it doesn't always get you where you want to go. Unfortunately, the system is like really screwed up at the end of the day. So just to people, but yeah. So I think my experience was more that like, when I felt like, you know what, I have an idea of what I would do. I'm excited about this. I also was encouraged that like, can you think of things that you would want to do outside of research? Like sometimes research alone isn't enough to set you apart, which is crazy, but that's kind of how it's come to nowadays. And, I thought of like, what other passion projects of mine could I work on? And once I felt like, this is like the narrative I see for myself, like I'm going to attack it. That's when I decided to do it. So very vague answer, but I feel like if anyone resonated with that, that's kind of where I came from.
I can go next. So full total transparency. I had all intentions on kind of same as Zara, going in and being like, look, I know I decided like just a couple months ago, but I'm going to apply this cycle. Well, I ended up failing step one, and that totally, so I guess my school's curriculum, we take step one after our third year clerkships. So the timeline between taking step one and then taking step two and then submitting an application was just all crunched up together. And there was just no time for me to do it all in one kind of go. If you're like a first or second year, really seriously take your studying seriously. Like, don't just try to scoop by, or if you know enough to pass an exam, like really try to understand the material, because looking back, I didn't have a solid foundation, and that's why I didn't pass, right? That might not be the case for you, but regardless. But I think that I kind of had to, well, I guess I'll back up a little bit more. I got into the research year because I met my mentor on Twitter. Med Twitter, don't sleep on it. I promise you, it can open so many doors for you, and you don't even know who you could meet, right? So I didn't start my research until, wait, oh my gosh, I'm veering off the question. What was the question one more time?
It is, how do you know you need a research year, and
Okay.
why and how did you decide to take a
Okay.
research?
Yes. So, I mean, with a fail step one, I mean, it's going to be maybe almost impossible to match without some kind of proof of productivity in the time between. And you really want to make sure that you give yourself enough bolstering on your application to be competitive and to still hold a space and to have people to vouch for you, not only as a person, but clinically and academically. And doing research can help, you know, strong mentors do that. I don't want to take too much time, so I'll pass it to the next person.
I don't mind going next. So for me, to sum it up, I just felt super lost. And I, again, come from a school that is relatively new. Half of it was in Australia, other half was here in the States. Didn't have a home program. Only 2 people in my program had gone into ophthalmology in the past, but that was like 5+ years ago. So I just felt lost, and I didn't have any research, and I knew how competitive of a field it was or is, and getting more competitive. So for me, I knew I wanted to take a research year. And then also for personal reasons, as Zara alluded to, like more than just medicine, like there's other things out there that influence your life. So for me, I was in a previous relationship, and we wanted to match our timeline so we would match together. So like there's multiple factors that come into play. Everyone's different. And I think we'll touch more upon it later on like factors to look for in terms of like which research position you strive for or reach out to. But yeah, that was like the main reasons why I chose to do a research year.
So for me, like I said earlier, before getting into medical school, I did do a master's program. So by the time I got to the end of my second year, I was beginning to get a little burnt out. And I knew that I was interested in ophthalmology from the research program I did during the summer of my first year. And so I had never had the chance to do research prior to that for various reasons. And I was really interested in maybe diving a little bit deeper into that because I was so interested over that summer. So I was very hesitant at first, and then decided to just go ahead and throw my hat in the ring for this grant because first off, I knew that I personally couldn't afford to, like it was mentioned earlier, it is expensive and it's something that you do have to take into account. So I went ahead and did that. But, you know, and as she was saying earlier, you do get a lot of different perspectives from your mentors. And so that is something to keep in mind. But also something that someone once told me is that you get a lot of advice from your mentors, but you never take exactly what they tell you to do word for word. So just keep that in mind. And it'll definitely be something that you evaluate as you go through medical school.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to a number of those different stories. Certainly so I did my third year in 2020. So my step one got moved like 2-3 times. I ended up taking it during what was supposed to be my winter break. So I just crammed for like 2 weeks, took a test, and then I was like back in the clinic. And so, and I don't know, I had a lot of other things go on in medical school where like they're seriously sapping the fun out of learning about medicine, which I don't know, it's kind of a part of it. So I did a year working on some software prior to this. is mostly mathematical software that I was intending to use to kind of simulate optics. But then I kind of accidentally fell into meeting one of my mentors. And I talked to him with a background, and he was like, you could probably apply now. You might even get in. But he's like, dude, like you're he's like, you're salty, and I could tell. He's like, you can't be like that on interviews, man. You gotta figure that out first. So I think like doing a focused research year specifically in ophthalmology, and he said, and make sure you target a place where you can, get like a recommendation that people are going to take notice of. So I don't know if I'm spilling over into other questions, but more or less, my mentor gave me like a short list of targets and was like, if you can get a letter from one of these people, like you'll definitely be in there with a shot. And given my background and stuff, basically he looked at my studies prior, my background, my skill set, and was like, you're a specific type of candidate. Like you're not the, the thing that most people probably think standard route candidate for ophthalmology. They're thinking, AOA, high board scores, spoiled for choice, blah, blah, blah. He's like, you have like a very specific skill set to they'll find useful. You just have to get somewhere where you can showcase that, and then you'll have some people in your corner. You'll be able to, if you do it right, parlay that into an opportunity. So once he told me that, because when I sat down and talked with him, I was at the point where I was like, is this real? Is this just a pipe dream? I'm just screwing around. Did I screw up too much? Do I need to just shut up and do IM because I'm already older? I don't want to spend more time, tilting at windmills or chasing waterfalls or whatever. And he's like, no, it's possible. He's like, it won't be easy. He's like, I can't guarantee you anything, but if you can do these things, you got a shot. So he told me that, and then I immediately turned around and sent out some emails, got on a plane out to Portland, met people in person, and he also gave me some certain instructions, like make sure it's paid, make sure you've got, make sure they are gonna meet your needs for whatever. And we can talk more about that later, but he gave me a list. Basically, he set up a play and I ran it. So that's what it was for me. But it really depends, right? The conventional wisdom would have been like, nah, man, just go, I don't know, and go do peds. I don't know, whatever. But he kind of holistically took me as a candidate and was like, this is what I think. These are the people that I think would be good. And specifically, one of the people I met with is a Dr. Claude Burgoyne, who works at Legacy, who's up in Portland. He's known for studying glaucoma, specifically the mechanics of the optic nerve head. But when I met with him, he never even met, and I'm talking about Dr. O'Reese Knight. So anybody who's familiar with Rab Venable might know him. But when I told him about what Dr. Knight told me, he was just like, well, I've never met Dr. Knight, but he seems to be a very smart man because he gave you some excellent advice. So that's kind of my take on the research year. I was like, I want to improve my chances. And it really has allowed me to reconnect with medicine in a meaningful way. I found a way to do research that ties in my prior skills and experience. And I've been able to do a lot of outreach. In fact, I'm on the road now doing an outreach clinic where I get to work with underserved populations and help them with their eye health. And I think for most of us, the best part of medical school is actually getting to interact and help patients, and not fighting with the administration about whatever it is.
Right. All right, and then I'll finish this out. I think I, similarly to John, was like wanting to bolster my application. So for me, I felt like my clerkship grades weren't very good. I especially struggled on the shelves, and to make it actually helpful for you guys, I will let you guys know what I like got and like how I did. So I got, I think our school uses the like ABC system. So I got primarily B's and B pluses in all of my core clerkships. So that's like surgery, peds, OB-GYN, and internal medicine. So because I got B's in all of those, and that was kind of on the lesser side of the histogram for my school, I felt like I should do something to try to bolster my thing, especially because I didn't do any research beforehand. I think for the high pass system, that's like just pass for most of the clerkships. So my advisor actually said that like, oh, you don't need to take a research year, only do it if you want to, like Zara was saying. But I think more so than wanting to do research specifically, I really wanted to get into ophthalmology. So I was like, okay, it's worth it. I'll like just try to pull together something. So I actually like waited until my last rotations shelf scores came out. So like my IM shelf score came out, it was not good. So I was like, okay, within these next 2 weeks, I need to find a research year. So I kind of scrambled and found something within like 10 days of finishing third year. But yeah.
Dara just made a great suggestion, and we're going to combine some of these questions for the sake of time. So I'm going to go ahead and read the questions, and then please answer them in any order. What were the major pros and cons you weighed when you were making the decision to take your research fellowship? How did you secure a great research year position? And what are some resources we can use to find research year opportunities? And what is the general timeline for applying for research year positions? Did you focus your efforts on applying to one program, or did you apply to multiple programs? What did you specifically look for in the research year programs you were applying to? And can you finally speak to the types of research year programs? If I need to repeat any of the questions, please let me know.
I don't mind starting. So I shared something in the chat that helped me when I was looking. It's Utah's page for like pre-residency spots, and it gives an outline for by region what types of positions are available. Most of them are application based, and so for me, I at least reached out and told them that I was interested, if anything, like learning more information and like trying to answer some questions that I had, if not applied. But the position I currently have was just based off a cold email. And my whole point was like, apply to everything, apply broadly, because nothing's guaranteed. And my biggest lesson was just create your own position, if anything. If you have someone who, you know, you've like done a review on and like their name keeps popping up and like you think it's super cool, like hit them up and be like, if they don't have any research fellows, maybe you could be their first one. People sometimes have grants, or like most times have grants to fund their projects. And that's a way that you can at least bring up the issue of funding. Because for me, funding was like, I have to get funding, otherwise I couldn't survive. Plus, for me, I was post-graduating medical school. And so I wanted to make sure I mentioned that it's safer to take a research year while in medical school because it's more protected that way in terms of like finance, because you don't have to start paying back loans. So that's one issue that people may potentially run against if you take a research year after. I'm not saying that it's impossible, because that's what I'm doing, but I think it's just safer. And if I had to do it over again, I'd probably try and do it during medical school, which I actually tried, but it was COVID. So that's why I got a lot of no's. But yeah, those are my 2 cents on where I started. And oh, I see that Shiba threw some questions on here, but so like funding was definitely something I looked for. That was one of my criteria. Two was a mentor slash sponsor who had a track record of getting people into residency. So for me, I just, again, cold emailed a lot of people who I thought, whose research was really interesting. And luckily enough, one of them got back to me. I had so many unanswered emails, like just inboxes full of them. So definitely spread your wings. Don't be afraid to, get a no, because that doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. You're just back where you started. And again, you only need one person. And that person for me was here at Bascom. So
I'm going to piggyback off Nico because I totally agree with everything he said. I also think apply broadly is very good advice. I would just add to like when you email, maybe email a little bit more specifically because like basically exactly what he said. A lot of these applications, like a ton of students are applying. If you can see the link, someone else can see the link. Sometimes there are hidden gem like scholarships that aren't as advertised or may not be on this page. Like it might be at your own program. You might know a friend. Definitely apply broadly. There's no harm in doing such, but for me, I actually emailed my mentor. She didn't like that I ended up doing my research year with. For me, I had the luck of home programs. So if you're in that boat where you're going to be considering it at your home program, I would advise this to you as well. Just like maybe wait to hear back. You don't want to email multiple people at your school or even in general, especially if you're willing to work for free, like for without funding, because pretty much anyone will say yes to you. I think like, anyone that takes on mentees and does productive research, if you're willing to do it for free. So just be careful with your emails because like you don't want to have to like say to somebody that, oh, just kidding, I heard back from someone else first. That's like, no. So just be careful with your emails. When I emailed my mentor, she was in Hawaii or something. And so she got back to me like 3 weeks late. And Nico had actually emailed Dr. Galore and like on that, like the last day of that third week. And because I was like, oh, Dr. Lee doesn't want a student. And then ultimately they both got back to me the next day and I was like, oh shit. So just be careful with who you email. And I definitely had a certain, like, I only have a certain perspective. I did my research at an academic institution, so I'm biased towards it. But I would say if you have the choice, it might be nice to do it academic versus private. Of course, like everyone's in a different boat. A lot of perks to academic institutions that like you can work with other mentors throughout your year if you want to, if your program allows you. I didn't do a program, so I don't always know what what the restrictions are. Second to that, I loved working with residents. I think it's a huge plus. There's like it's like a great way to ask questions, like the dumb questions, especially in the beginning of the year when I was like, I don't know how to do stats that well. It's just like a little bridge between you and your attendings. And then also once you kind of build a network of like friends or, mentee, like or mentors, I mean, you can kind of be on each other's papers. It's like good to build a team that way. And then it sounds weird, but then they're not medical students. So it's not even like everyone's like applying to different things right now. So it's kind of nice to just help each other out, especially with residents. So I definitely used a lot of resident like teamwork in my research year. And then, so I guess I had a weird thing because I applied to my home program only and then did it at the very end of my year. So someone else could probably speak better on that. But the one thing I wanted to mention was that research programs, like the ones at Bascom that I've seen friends go through in comparison to what I did, is a lot of times when you do a research program, it's a little bit more like, not in a negative way, but it's like more spoon fed, right? Like they're going to give you projects and then you do those projects versus if you take on an autonomous year, it's a lot more work. So I'm just warning you to what you're signing up for because that's what I did. And I wanted that though. So that's what I wanted to have like free will to do my own thing, whatever projects I wanted with whoever I wanted. I wanted to be able to like make my mistakes and then be able to change anything I wanted, like to control my year. I did have friends go through like really I shouldn't say restricted, it's like structured programs where they came out of it like, thank God I was handed all these projects. I couldn't have done it alone. I also had people go through and be like, damn, I didn't publish anything because like my mentor only had 2 big projects for the year and they were both basic science and it didn't get published. So with the programs, just be careful, make sure you know what you're signing up for, maybe talk to someone who's gone through it. And then if you're on your own, have a plan. And if there are students that have worked with that mentor before, understand their style. Are they hands-on, hands-off? Like just know what you're signing up for. It's my overall advice.
To piggyback off of that, I also obviously am doing research at an institution. Some benefits are, one, there's probably a statistician somewhere in the department that you can link up with and learn from. I personally have never been too good with running my own stats and doing my own analyses. And if you're able to find someone in the department and link onto them and learn from them, I really recommend doing that. It's going to help. I mean, they're going to tell you what graphs are the best to use and what's going to look the best on posters, and like, okay, yeah, your ideas for this analysis were good, but maybe you could do this instead, and maybe you would have a bigger outcome, and maybe it might be more clinically relevant in the long run. The second thing is the timeline for positions. I'm pretty sure most mentors are looking for a person to do at least 12 months of time. But if you find a mentor who cares about you, I can't stress this enough. They will be willing to move mountains for you. I mean, my official research is only going to be like 7.5 months because I had to retake my exams, and she gave me time and leeway for step 2. And you don't have to be in that structured, like, okay, if you can't do 12 months, you know, you can't be here. Maybe that's not the right program for you. Another thing on top of that is, depending how much time you guys have, whether you spend 12 months, whether you spend 6 months, you need to make sure that you're getting something out of the year. Like, just like Zara said, if you're working with someone who has a zillion publications, but their research is really slow and you're on a time crunch, you need to figure out, how can I work with this mentor to get the most out of it? Whether that's doing case reports, whether that's writing chapters in a textbook, whether that's helping, you know, do just little things to get your name on paper, right? So another thing to kind of look for, are you looking for basic research? Are you looking for clinical research? I would really recommend doing clinical research, only because it's a lot faster. It's a lot more interesting if you don't really, maybe not care, but if you're less interested in the minutia of like the very nitty gritty things of medicine versus on a health disparity level, or maybe on a specific disease level. Like, really think about that before you just sign up and say, look, I just want research, I'm desperate, I'll do anything. Like, no, you're going to set yourself up and you're going to be salty when you're working on a project that you don't care about. Another thing is, try to make sure that you're getting involved in whatever program it is that you're at. So if you're not, even if you're at your home institution, but specifically for those who are out of ways, like I joined Ohio State's ophthalmology interest group. I volunteer at the free clinic the free eye care clinic that they have. I go to everything that I can so that different physicians, different residents, I get to know everybody. They get to know me personally. You can create a network, you can make friends, you can learn the inside scoop, and you can really just leave knowing that you left an impact, that people know your name, make yourself present. Don't just go and tunnel in and do your research and go home. Like, really try to make the most of what you can.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Alana was saying. I try to do a clinical one if you can. I think it's a lot more productive. I actually did a wet lab one, and I was lucky enough to publish on other people's papers, but my own project did not publish. So that's pretty typical for wet lab. Things just move slowly, and it's like really hard to guarantee. Their reviewers are really strict with like redoing experiments, so it's just difficult. And then you mentioned like getting involved in the ophthalmology department, and I think that's super huge. Like, make sure you work with people outside of your lab as well. A lot of times the PIs will know each other, so if like they just talk about something that's interesting during the lab meeting, you can always like email, be like, hey, like if you need any help with that, just put yourself out there. And I think that's how I was able to get onto like other people's papers, is like, oh, this thing sounds interesting, and I think my skill set would be helpful for that project. If they're like, I need an image made, volunteer, just be like, hey, I can draw this thing, and just learn it and do it for them. They'll be really appreciative and put your name on for other people's papers as well.
Okay, we can move to another question. There's so much that can be done. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'll be brief because they pretty much covered most of this. I specifically, so in the past, I studied computer science, so I know how to do programming, image processing. So I actually work in, my research lab is an ophthalmology research lab. We work with prototype OCT and SLO devices that they use to screen premature babies for retinopathy or prematurity. And since I had that background, my position is actually a position that they posted a job link for on, for a postdoc. I emailed the lab and told them my background. It was like, hey, like, I think I can help out on this project. Like maybe not fulfill the role of the postdoc that you're looking for, but I'm trying to do a research here. I got interviewed. My project has 2 PIs, one of which is is Yifan Jian. He's a PhD. He does optical engineering. The other one is MD, MPH, Dr. Peter Campbell, who specializes in retinopathy of prematurity. So they brought me in, and I basically do the pipeline for their data processing. So from now on, like basically all the papers coming out of that lab will have my name on it because they use my software to process their data. I also have a presentation that I'll be doing at ARVO this year. I have a poster. Hopefully we're going to turn that into a paper, and I'm hoping to get one more paper out. But when I sat down and spoke with Yifan at the beginning of the year during my interview, you know, the one thing I want to say is when you do these positions, do it like a job interview. Like they want something out of you. They get, you know, labor and the skill set. I mean, even if it's basic, but you lay out for them what you want and what you need. Like I told him, you know, I wanted to do it, but I got to have a paid position. Like I can't move across the country on dreams and the promises of a future. Like I got bills I have to pay and things like that. So, but he was like, there's no problem. You know, I got that postdoc spot essentially. And as Alana mentioned, it's usually they're looking for you to commit, you know, at least a year, like they're investing in you. But the upside is like, if you do a good job, you know, they'll want you back. And that's something that you can include in, you know, any number of things. You know, you can talk about it during your interviews. I know not there yet, but I've also, I'm applying for a ways right now, one of which I'm intending to do at OHSU. One of the things you have to include in those usually is a letter of interest saying why you should be at this specific place. Well, if you've been there doing research and like everybody else is saying, contributing in other ways out there, volunteering with volunteering in the community, doing outreach and all those things, it makes a very compelling case for taking you for, you know, one of the 8 spots that they have for their ways as opposed to some random other person. And as everybody else mentioned, building those relationships when it comes time for interview season, you know, you can tie some of that in. I mean, we'll see how it goes for me, but I know a number of people in the ophthalmology program here, and then also other people at other programs in the city, as well as the people I volunteer with. So that's my 2 cents, but I'll let you.
Okay. The next question is that there's so much to do in a research year. How did you guys plan your year overall, your days? How did you make sure you were going to be productive and leverage opportunities and turn them into publications and manuscripts and poster presentations?
I'll give like a brief summary. I definitely like made mistakes along this pathway, but I think a good way, rather than my journey, I'll just tell you what I think I would do now. I think when you pick your mentor and you start your year, maybe like come up with one project together that you're like, you know, for example, my mentor was doing a control trial, which is like a pretty like large scale project. I was like, okay, that's like a good one to get started with. It involves steps of like actual data collection, not just a chart review or something. Try to come up with a larger scale project like that to get started, because what's also important about your research year is to develop a strong relationship with your mentor. And you want to try to do that early, right? Like show them like, I'm coming on time every day. I'm making the project move faster than you thought it was going to do. And then like, you don't have to be like, oh, I'm a great chart reviewer. Like they want to like show them what you can do in person a little bit more. It allows for good FaceTime too. And that way you can start to learn the ropes of like the lab or like the environment, whatever the setting is. I think that's really important. So I would say like your first month, whatever, it depends on how much time you have, but like definitely get the lay of the land. And in the meantime, just show your work ethic. I think nothing is more impressive than work ethic. It's okay if you don't know how to use SPSS. You can figure that out along the way. Be honest about what your vulnerabilities are. But I think it's important to show growth. So just like that's my theme, is just keep doing better throughout the year. And start, what I didn't do is I kind of front loaded a bunch of projects at once and then suffered like mid-year where I was like, oh my God, I have too many projects. it's a way to go. It did end up like it forced me to get through them all, but at the end of the day, you can definitely spread that out and spread the pain out. So like day to day, if you're designing your own days, just be productive like the same way you have been in med school. You definitely don't need to be taught that. But in a research year, it's self-paced. So like enjoy the freedom a little bit. You're probably burnt out and you deserve it. But that being said, just show your work ethic, develop a great relationship, become friends with everyone in that clinic, like all the admin people, all the residents. It's important. Like it's important to show that you're personable and normal, and you want everyone on your side, because like you're going to be working with everyone in this office, everyone on this floor. So just like, get to know everyone. You don't have to show them you're here for a year. Like you don't have to be a gunner on your first day, etc. So, okay, you get that point. And then I think from there, once you develop relationships with your mentor, do a couple with your mentor, whatever scale you want, before you start to outreach. That's my advice. I think it's, again, important. This person's your main like letter writer. Just get a strong connection going with them. Make sure it's okay with them that you're branching out when it is, depending on the type of program you're in. Then as you start to branch out, like I mentioned the resident thing before, and someone touched on this too, like jumping on other people's papers. It's a great way to develop like quantity, which unfortunately is just part of the process. Like you want to hit a certain number of quantity. So just like jump on what you can along the way with other people as you start to like branch out. Just do it strategically. So, okay.
I will say I'm kind of in the process of, I guess, executing my plan. So when I came in, I had a project that I planned with my PI, and she's more kind of on the basic science level. We're doing genetics research on retinitis pigmentosa. However, her lab is within a larger lab, and they have clinical geneticists and everything in that lab. So I'm also going to be working with them, doing case reports, chart reviews, et cetera. So while I'm also working on a project that's slower, as well as assisting with the other projects within her smaller lab, I'm already beginning to branch out, like Zara, I'm sorry if I said her name wrong, as she was previously mentioning, to get the quantity that has been mentioned. So like building that relationship with your mentor is also important. As she was saying, she kind of really hit all of the points that I was going to say, to be brief.
I'm going to tell you guys, you're going to have to be borderline annoying if your projects aren't moving as quickly as you want them to, because at the end of the day, it's you who's going to be applying. They're already established physicians. If they're not worried about if you're not worried about your projects, they're not going to be more worried about them than you are. So you really have to push. And it's okay. I mean, obviously you need to relegate when you're going to really be like, okay, like I need to get this done. And then if you're seeing that things aren't moving, then you need to just take the initiative. Stop asking to do things and just start writing, or just start coming up with questions of things that you want to analyze, or start talking to other doctors on how can I move forward? How can I get enough material to publish? And just like Sherelle said, doing case reports, doing little tangible quick things that you can kind of push out quickly as your big research is progressing is, I guess, kind of the key to success if you're not seeing the progress that you want.
And then we'll move on to one more question and then open up the chat for audience questions. How did you guys go about presenting your research at conferences? And if you have not had the chance to present your research at a conference, how are you planning to do that and identifying places to present? Xiaoyu, maybe we can start with you for this question, and then Dr. Reyes, you can go afterwards.
Yeah, so I presented mine at ARVO and ASRS, and for ARVO, I think it was just like a lab-wide, everyone who wanted to submit something was able to submit something, and then the lab provided the housing and travel expenses and such for ARVO. And then for ASRS, actually, it was another like physician, another retina ophthalmologist who had been working with for a longer period of time, actually, who told us about the deadline and like asked us to apply. So I didn't do too much. I think I wasn't as proactive as some of the other people here. I kind of just like went along and did my work, which I suggest you guys be more proactive like others and actually have a plan going in. But I was kind of like, I just want to do well on my project and like try to get things done. But yeah, those are, how did I go about presenting? I think I just like made posters for them. I didn't do the speaker one because I didn't have, like I said, my project itself didn't published. So I didn't have like a full paper of results to present, but I was lucky enough that they still accepted my preliminary results for ARVO. So I think if I had one tip, it would just be like, just like apply to all the conferences that you might want to, like virtual ones, like in-person ones, anything, just throw what you have currently at it, because the worst thing that can happen is you don't get in, but maybe they'll like let you go present, and that'll be a great thing to add and a great experience because you can do a lot of networking there as well.
Yeah, I agree with everything Xiaoyu said. I think networking is huge, especially in such a small field of ophthalmology. I would suggest to honestly try and go to as many conferences as you can. One, afford, two, just like have the bandwidth to do. And I've been told to target ARVO and AEO. Those are like the two biggest ones. But there's so many out there that there's like uveitis, there's just every subspecialty has their own, and then some. So there's a lot of meetings to choose from, and so try and go. And then in terms of like presentations, I got lucky. So I've been working on a few projects for the past year now, and one of them was accepted as an oral presentation at AEO last year, where thankfully and luckily I got best paper award for that. So big tip is no ums, no buts. That was like drilled into me. And then as I say after, and then another one is just to keep practicing with someone who has a lot of presentation experience. And so reach out to them. For me, luckily, it was my mentor. She presents all the time. So she would critique me. I would practice all the time with her. And then at ARVO, if you'll be there, I'll be doing another oral presentation on a different project. So. I see a question here from Isabella. The two big ones are AAO, the American Academy of Ophthalmology. It's going to be taking place in November in San Francisco. And then the other one is ARVO, which is the research focused one. And that one's in New Orleans next month.
So we can open up the floor now for questions from everyone. If I didn't ask your question, please ask it.
This is kind of like a more general question, but I think, Zara, you mentioned using Med Twitter, which I've heard a bunch of people say to get on Med Twitter. Can you talk about how you use that and any tips for someone who's just joining Med Twitter?
Sure. I don't want to steal someone's thunder. I think someone else said it. I definitely nodded to it. So whoever brought it up can chime in, but I definitely use Med Twitter a lot as well. I think that like I actually made it as soon as I decided in my third year, and it feels dorky at first, but honestly, everyone's doing it. And I think everyone also knows everyone's doing it. So it's okay. I definitely used that space to like, I pretty much shared every time an abstract of mine got accepted. On that note, I definitely want to say, Xiaoyu is correct. Preliminary results still get accepted. Just submit it. Just submit your abstracts. It's worth it. Okay. So I would just kind of like share like, oh, an abstract or like such and such development. I think that like, you know, it doesn't matter like the magnitude of what your accomplishment is. It doesn't have to be an accomplishment. I just think it's like name and face. It helps to get your like, you know, like Nico said, networking is very important and it's a very small community. I feel like there was times where I saw someone and I was like, oh, I know you from Twitter. And then they were like, yeah, I know you from Twitter. It happens. So I, on the other hand, this is not everyone's thing for sure. I also use Instagram a lot to network. Definitely not up everyone's alley. I understand. I just like felt comfortable doing so. And I think in any realm, since things have gone more virtual, people are very comfortable connecting over social media. And it's especially on Twitter, it's not as unprofessional, in my opinion, as you think. So be mindful of how you're sharing things. I would definitely make a new Med Twitter. I'm sure the panelists might say the same. Like I have my like high school one, or like, I don't even want to read that. So just, you know, like make a new one and put up a nice headshot. You know, look at what I did was when I made mine, and you guys are welcome to do this with any of our Twitters. I went to like someone who had just matched and I followed everyone that they followed, because I was like, okay, these are all probably attendings or residents somewhere or the programs. Like and then I looked at the types of bios people had, and I did that. I did like a lame intro post like everyone else did. And then I just kind of kept posting. I definitely think it was just good to have like name and face. And then on the note of networking, like I always say, if you meet somebody twice, they'll remember you. So I feel like on Med Twitter, like, you know, it doesn't take too much to get your name out there. So that's my overall thought.
For the sake of time, you can go to the next question if you want.
I don't see anything in the chat box yet. Does anyone have a question to ask? And as we wait for someone to ask a question, Dr. Reyes, we did have some questions specifically for IMGs. So perhaps you can address those two. As an IMG, what can we do at our home country to increase our chances to secure research positions? And what do you recommend for an IMG to succeed during their research year?
Yeah, sure. Just to preface, so I attended and graduated from an international program. So on paper, I am considered an IMG, but I was born in California and did undergrad and grad school there too. But in terms of everything that I've been experiencing and have been told as well, board scores, you know, are very important, obviously. So things that are expected is research. And the other thing is, like, my medical school had a kind of weird grading system. Is not A, B, C, D. It was one. And so interpreting those scores, it's from the program perspective, it's just weird. So to boil it down, it's scores, mentorship in terms of like who is writing your paper, or sorry, your letter, and then a visa status, and if you need one or not. So that's what I've been told, and friends who are going through the process as well. So for IMGs, that's probably what's, you know, the hurdles that's going to come against them. And then in terms of being successful during a research year, especially as an IMG, again, scores, like everyone's going to have that, but to everyone, domestic or abroad, like it's who's going to get that phone call, who's going to be reading the letter that that someone has sponsored you for. So like, do they know them? Do they not? So networking, again, is huge.
I had a question. How do you go about getting involved in case reports? I know that was mentioned earlier. I was kind of interested in that.
So I personally don't have too much experience. I haven't written my own case report. So if anyone here actually has, please cut me off. But to my understanding, anytime you see an interesting patient or something that's a little weird, something out of the ordinary, maybe they're on a special medication and maybe something is seeming puzzling, right? You see the patient, go review the literature, just do a little PubMed search, just type like medication name, I don't know, for ophthalmology, let's just say like a cancer medication. And how does this maybe respond to a person with dry eye? Like maybe there's nothing written on that. Case reports are basically like, you find something funky and it's like a short write-up of something that can stem into a bigger project for maybe someone with the resources or someone with the means to create a big project out of it. It doesn't have to be too, like, you don't have to put too much pressure on yourself for it. It's nothing like writing a manuscript, but I can drop some examples in the chat because I have a couple, and then you can read through them and kind of get an idea of, you know, what you'd be doing. I guess I can also touch on Twitter now while I'm looking for those links. So I really recommend, like, if you're a first-gen med student, or if you don't have a home program, or if you just don't really know what to do, just tweet it. I mean, literally use any hashtags you want. I know Zara mentioned med Twitter and ophtho Twitter, but you could just type like or hashtag ophtho. Or what I would recommend doing is, let's say there's a program that you want to go to for residency, or maybe you know that this program has a reputation of like having really friendly attendings or people that really are charitable or whatever the case may be. Try to find their Twitter pages, take a little skim through their tweets. I wouldn't recommend just blindly following everybody, because not everybody has the best intentions, and like maybe you follow someone and maybe they just start, keeping tabs on you and you're tweeting things that they don't agree with, and maybe it leaves, a sour taste in their mouth. You don't want to set yourself up for any type of failure. You want to keep your med Twitter as clean cut and as like PG rated as you can. Obviously, let your personality shine through your tweets, but don't overstep. Know that if you have a public platform, that anybody, any program director, any chair, anyone can see it and can peruse through your stuff. So just be mindful of what you're posting. In terms of how I secured my research year, I think I just posted like, hey, I'm a first gen student. I'm interested in ophtho. I'm a little scared. I don't know what to do. Some people started replying, and then like, as you kind of develop your network of like following people and seeing what they're interested in, you'll get on their people's pages. And then eventually you can just get the courage and say, hey, look, I'm going to send this person a DM. They don't respond, I'm going to send this person a DM. Just treat it very casually. I mean, don't put too much pressure on yourself. If people don't respond, fine. I mean, most attendings, like, just, they're also like regular adults. Not everybody's checking their Twitter every 5 minutes. But if it's someone that you're really dedicated to working with, then find their email, find them online, find, their assistant who you can reach out to set up a Zoom meeting or some type of appointment to really get on their radar. That's how I secured my research year. And then after you do that, make sure you don't miss a meeting. Don't oversleep. Don't forget to schedule it in your calendar. Don't forget to set a timer or an alarm, because they're going out of their way. You don't know what they have going on in their busy schedule. And if you aren't as serious and as, I don't know, I'm not trying to tell you to be a gunner, but like, if you're not as gung-ho about it, then they're going to brush you off, and it's going to be easy to forget about you if you don't try and make yourself to stay present. Other than that, use as many hashtags as possible. It's Twitter. You can be annoying. You can always like spam your account. Post your headshot. Tell people like what you might be interested in research, or anything in ophthalmology that might be interesting to you, or just kind of let your personality shine. Like, if you like to cook, post your recipes, or if you have a dog, like post your dog and your family or whatever. Sorry for blabbing.
I have a few questions in the chat. So the first one is a research year in ophthalmology an appropriate backup plan if a person does not match as planned?
I would say so. I would say that it's like a pretty solid backup plan. I think that it's something that like you should maybe prepare for, just in case, like, you never know how match will go. So it's like a good idea to have that as a back burner. Maybe other people here might know of other options, but I think that's the most traditional approach.
Okay, and then the next question is, as a student who is about to start a research year in a couple of months, are there any skills, technical, personal, etc., that you would recommend learning before starting?
I guess it would depend on the type of research that you're doing. But in particular, I would definitely say before you get there, of course, you can start reading up on whatever disorder or whatever your research is going to be pertaining to, because that'll always be important. And then if you can also reference those papers to your PI or your mentor, whenever you guys are talking about maybe your experiments or setting up your project, that will show that you're motivated and you've really been doing the work, as it was mentioned earlier, because your work ethic is going to be it's going to come into question. They're going to want to see how hard you work, because that's going to determine how much they're willing to trust you with. So if you come in and show that you're prepared and willing to go, that's always a good starting point. But you'll have plenty of time, I'm sure, to pick up on the technical skills and everything.
And another question is, how was it hopping back into school after your research year, and what difficulties have you had?
I don't know if everyone else is in this position yet. I think Sha, you and I went through interviews and are now fourth years, right? So I think it's pretty chill. I think fourth year is like a year that doesn't need to, like, there's no major clerkships going on. Like, it's just like a filler year, in my opinion, like while you apply. So you can use it like to your advantage by doing aways and doing electives that are helpful for you, doing your sub-Is. Outside of that, it's kind of, usually it's a year that you can make your own. At least that was my experience. So it was weird to go back to it, but at the end of the day, you end up focusing more in ophthalmology than you did before, especially like for this field. It's not usually a core rotation, but then in your fourth year, you're suddenly doing like a lot of ophtho as you do aways and specialized electives. So I felt like it was helpful, if anything, but it definitely wasn't like hard, or I didn't feel very estranged besides having a new class.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Fourth year is a lot more chill than the other years. I did find on my sub I had forgotten a lot of body medicine, as they say. I did it in internal medicine. I was kind of like, oh, but then I think if you just like let your team know, like, hey, I just came off of a research year for ophtho, they're like, oh, okay, it's okay. It's pretty normal. And then another great thing that I just remembered about doing the research year, especially if you are doing it at your own home institution, which is hard, obviously, because not everyone, like a lot of people don't have home institutions. But during fourth year, I tried to schedule a lot of research time, which is like flexible time that you can like ask for the credits for that research if you don't get an OA. So I basically had my schedule cleared from like March until August. And then I planned to do 3 months of research within that time, but that scheduling of that time was flexible. So I went on an OA, came back, did a month of research, went on another OA, and then continued my research project. And that's like really helpful. Maybe if you can have like a virtual research project ongoing with your research year, that could also be really helpful to continue to earn credits in a more flexible way throughout your fourth year.
And like a quick tip too, like the months up until you apply, which is usually like the September 1st timeframe, like whatever part of that is an official fourth year, try to either do like opto specific things or like as much flexibility as possible. If your school does have other rotations, try to push them off. That's my opinion until after, because like it's a really important time. Like get your letters, get your like things in order. And if you did do a research year, it's a great time to finish the papers. Like I even started a couple papers in that time. I actually like hot take, I think you can still put it on your app. Again, quantities. So I definitely was really productive like in my June, July leading up to app. So just a thought.
Another question, how is doing research at international institutions that are well known, like Aravind Eye Hospital in India, looked at compared to doing research at places within the country? Would it be looked at positively if it's well-known international institutes, or is it better to just stick with doing research at places within the country so you could build connections that would help when applying to residency?
I don't know if any of us are in this position, right? But I have a mentee in the spot right now who's doing international research year. And I know that as she's applying, she's having difficulty because I think it's interesting to do that. And it's probably a cool part of your narrative, but the connections and networks that are kind of part of the US opto like system here, it's a little tough. Then those letters, unfortunately, are a little bit like they carry a little less weight, I guess, because you don't like there's no one that recognizes that name sometimes. That's the only thing I can think of, just to keep that in mind. I would say maybe ask mentors that have gone through that process though, because I could know for sure.
I had a question, if any of you had any experience with this. If there is like a specific program that you're interested in doing research with, but you look on like their website and everything and there's nothing published, who, I guess, would you say strategically is like the person within the program that you would contact, like cold emailing about getting involved with a research opportunity, specifically if it's one that you're seeking funding for?
Okay, I'll jump on that one. So I would say like, so I assume this is like a specific lab that you're familiar with and they do research in an area that you have experience. Usually, I mean, it kind of depends, but I think a lot of places they'll have like a lab contact email, right? I would probably go for that one over just cold contacting like the lab head. I mean, other people may have different opinions on that. I think it really depends. I've done both, right? So I contacted Dr. Burgoyne directly, and he was open to just chatting with me and talking. And then I told him what I wanted, and he's like, "Oh yeah, cool." The other one, I'm at the Cool Lab, which is run by Dr. David Wong. He's the co-inventor of OCT. So I wasn't really comfortable with just hitting him up out of nowhere, and having gone sitting where I am now, that was the right decision. Like, cold emailing him would have been a bad move. I emailed the lab. They had a research project that was going on, like I said, and I was like, listen, I have these skills. I think I can help out. And then the person who replied to me was one of my PIs now. He got back to me and was like, hey, we're interested if you want to come out and talk. And I think initially he was just like, oh, you just want to, talk about the project, or maybe work remotely, like, do some like, manual segmentation or whatever. But after we talked and I found out my background and I came out there, he's like, oh no, you can just straight up do this job I need done. So that's what I would say. If you've got anyone who knows the lab head and you have some kind of insight into their personality, then you can like go directly and contact them. But it really depends on the personality. Like, some people are like super chill and they love teaching and mentoring, and other people are like kind of, very busy and hardcore, and you're not likely to get a response if you go straight at them. So your mileage may vary, but that's what I would say.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I'm gonna try to attack some of these questions in the chat. So about the number, I feel like that's a question everyone wants to know the answer to. I don't think there's a right answer. I don't know, maybe someone else should attest this. I made up this number, and maybe it's high, maybe it's low, but I was like, I'm gonna hit 12. That might be a lot, that might be a little. I don't know. That was the number I created for myself. It felt like a number I was confident about. I sat on a panel once that was 4 program directors of like really great institutions, and I was surprised by their answers. So I'm going to share that instead. Someone asked that to them, and basically one of them said like, she was the Hopkins program director. She said like, I think if you can get like any number of publications, it's like fine for us. Like, we don't have a standard, but again, this was for students like without a research year. So that's where I'm guiding my answer towards. I think if you're not taking a research year, there's actually no set number. And I would attest to that. I think like you want to have something, but like whether it's 2 or 5, like, I don't think that there's always a right answer or a rubric to it, but I do think if you take a research year, there is an expectation to be productive. I don't know why I came up with 12. I just looked at students that had kind of like done well in the past, and like I tried to meet that at some point, like halfway through my year at least. But it depends what you're looking for in your year. And I think that like it depends like the caliber of your projects. You're not going to do 12 basic science projects. So just, I don't know, aim for like 8, 9, something that you think that like you'll feel confident talking about. And someone asked this earlier, or it was on the sheet, but how do you answer questions about research year in interviews? Obviously there's a ton of things to say about that, but one thing is that know all of your research projects. For anyone who's like nearing the interview stage, have like a 1-minute elevator pitch ready about any project, because they will like pull a name and be like, oh, tell me about this project. And you have to say like, oh, this is what it was. Like, you have to be confident. So make sure you know like what you're getting involved with, even if your name is just on it.
Just to piggyback off Zara, I've been told at least one first authorship, at least. And that should be in like a more meaty project and not just one case report. But that's where collaboration comes into play too, in terms of quantity. So like, hit up your friends, like, this is hard enough as it is to do on your own. So be there for each other. And I think that's why ophthalmology is so great, because everyone is typically there for each other. So it's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'll just want to jump on that. Just like they said, I don't think there's a set number, but it's really going to depend on the quality, right? You definitely want to be first author on at least one thing. And then beyond that, it's going to matter like, how much impact would this possibly have? I mean, you probably want more papers if they're just, kind of out there. But if you're going to publish a paper where you're publishing something that's never been published before, like, that's going to carry a lot of weight. Or if it's something that has some very significant clinical relevance that may, possibly change how, how we guide treatment in the future. If it's something big like that, you're not going to need much, because it's going to be a pretty big deal.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to, oh, sorry. Go ahead. And then,
It's okay.
no,
I was just
please.
going to also just comment on someone asking about how to stay up to date on research. The lens is a great resource that was mentioned. And also you could potentially maybe start. Oh, I'm sorry. Is my connection messing up? But I was also going to say there were some people at my school that started like a journal club. So that's something that you could also do to potentially stay up to date on research.
At this time, I'd like to thank all of our panelists. Thank you guys so much. And thank you for grace. We went 19 minutes past our end time. And thank you to all of the participants for such great questions and all of your engagement. The session was recorded and it will be uploaded sometime this week. And we hope you'll all join us next time. Thank you, everyone, and good night. And I see some emails before everyone starts leaving. So if anyone has additional questions and would like to follow up with our speakers, some of them have dropped their contact information into the chat box.
Oh yeah, let me throw mine in there. I got a couple direct messages.
Thank you so much for organizing this.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
Good night, everyone.
Y'all have a good night.
Good night. I'll just stay so people can get the information. So I'll stay around for like 2 more minutes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for your time. Have a good night.
Yeah, anybody who direct messaged me, make sure you get the email. Hit me on the email. I'll reply to all of those.
Thank you. Good night.